Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions. The mystery of the Sardinian Nuraghe 7,000 Bronze Age stone towers no one can explain. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. The island of Sardinia is covered in towers. Not Roman towers, not medieval castles, but Bronze Age stone structures built between 1900 and 730 BCE, distributed across the island at a density that has no parallel anywhere in the ancient world. There are approximately 7,000 of them still standing today. Archaeologists estimate that in antiquity, there may have been as many as 10,000. They are called nuraghi, singular nuraghe, and they are circular, truncated cone towers built from massive basalt blocks fitted together without mortar, typically between 10 and 20 meters tall, with internal chambers accessed by corbelled passages. And despite a century of intensive study, no one fully agrees on what they were for. The scale of the nuraghe-building enterprise is staggering. At the peak of construction during the Middle Bronze Age, approximately 1500–1200 BCE, Sardinia had an estimated population of around 300,000 people. Maintaining 10,000 stone towers with that population density means roughly one tower per 30 people, or one per square kilometer of the island's surface. These were not occasional landmarks. They were ubiquitous features of the entire Sardinian landscape, from the coast to the highest mountain valleys. The builders, the Nuragic civilization, also produced extraordinary bronze figurines, had extensive trading contacts with Egypt, Cyprus, and the Levant, and then, around 238 BCE when the Romans arrived, essentially ceased to exist as a distinct culture. Their language has never been deciphered. Their religion is largely unknown, and the towers they left behind remain unexplained. Were they fortresses, watchtowers, temples, the homes of chiefs, astronomical observatories, storage facilities for grain? Each of these theories has been proposed, and each accounts for some but not all of the evidence. Some nuraghi show signs of habitation, others show none. Some are arranged in defensive clusters, others stand alone on hilltops with no obvious strategic value. Some align with astronomical events, most do not. The most elaborate, the Nuraghe su Nuraxi at Barumini, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was a palace fortress complex so large it housed an entire village. But most nuraghi are simple towers, isolated in fields, their purpose encoded in a culture that left no writing and whose DNA has only recently been sequenced. What were 10,000 stone towers for? The island won't say. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we go further, if you are finding this investigation compelling, please take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good historical mystery. If you are watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. If you found us through Facebook, tap follow on our page. It takes just a few seconds, and it genuinely helps us keep making these documentaries. Now, let us get back to the investigation. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. The official story of technological progress follows a reassuring arc. Stone tools giving way to bronze, bronze to iron, iron to steel, and finally, the Industrial Revolution catapulting humanity into the modern age. In this narrative, each generation inherits a slightly more sophisticated toolkit than the last, and no knowledge is ever truly lost. It is a comfortable story. It is also, in key respects, demonstrably false. History is littered with technological achievements that appeared centuries before their supposed invention, vanished after the cultures that created them collapsed, and were reinvented, often with great difficulty, by later civilizations who had no idea the knowledge had ever existed. Roman concrete was stronger and more durable than most modern concrete, and was not matched again until the 21st century. Greek fire, the incendiary weapon that protected the Byzantine Empire for centuries, has never been fully reproduced. Damascus steel, capable of holding an edge that modern metallurgists struggle to replicate, disappeared with the craftsmen who made it. These are not myths. They are documented historical losses of genuine technical knowledge. When we encounter an object from the ancient world that should not exist, a battery from Baghdad dated to the Parthian era, a computing mechanism salvaged from an ancient shipwreck, a map showing geographical features that were not officially discovered for another millennium, the temptation is to dismiss it as misidentified or misstated. That dismissal is sometimes warranted. But when such objects accumulate, when the pattern becomes too consistent to ignore, the honest response is to ask whether our model of ancient capability is simply wrong. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Sardinian Nuraghe 7000 Bronze Age stone towers no one can explain is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Nuraghi of Sardinia represent one of the densest concentrations of prehistoric monuments on Earth. Current estimates place the surviving count at approximately 7,000 structures, with archaeological evidence suggesting the original total may have been closer to 10,000 across the island's 24,000 square kilometers. Construction began around 1900 BCE and continued until approximately 730 BCE, with the peak building period between 1500 and 1200 BCE corresponding to the Middle and Late Bronze Age. The structures are built from massive blocks of local basalt or limestone, typically weighing several tons each, fitted using the corbelling technique that also appears at Nuragic and the Maltese temples. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the Nuraghi at Barumini is the most extensively excavated and most complex Nuragic monument. It was excavated by Giovanni Liliu between 1949 and 1956 and designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1997. Nuragic consists of a central tower, originally approximately 18 meters tall, surrounded by a bastion of 4 additional towers, surrounded in turn by an outer wall, surrounded by a village of roughly 200 circular stone huts that housed the community. The site was occupied continuously from approximately 1500 BCE to the Roman period, and shows evidence of multiple phases of destruction, reconstruction, and defensive reinforcement, consistent with a site that was militarily significant over many centuries. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine Nuragic bronzes, the figurines and objects produced by Sardinia's Bronze Age culture are among the most artistically sophisticated small bronzes of the ancient Mediterranean. They depict warriors, priests, animals, boats, and multi-story tower models that serve as our best evidence for what the nuraghi originally looked like above their preserved lower courses. The bronzes show that nuraghi was sometimes depicted with multiple stories and elaborate superstructures no longer preserved. Nuragic bronzes have been found in archaeological contexts across the Mediterranean, at sanctuaries in Etruria, in hordes in Iberia, and most remarkably, at the Temple of Hera at Samos and at Olympia in Greece, suggesting Sardinian traders or mercenaries operated across the ancient Mediterranean world. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the Nuragic civilization had documented contact with Egypt during the New Kingdom period. Egyptian texts from approximately 1200 BCE mention the Shurdan or Shardana as mercenary warriors and sea raiders, and many scholars identify the Shardana with Sardinians. Egyptian relief carvings at Medinet Habu, depicting the Battle of the Sea Peoples under Ramesses Roman III, approximately 1175 BCE, show warriors who match descriptions of Sardinians in their distinctive horned helmets. The same helmet type depicted on Nuragic bronze figurines found in Sardinia. If this identification is correct, Nuragic warriors fought both for and against Egypt during one of the ancient world's most consequential conflicts. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the language spoken by the Nuragic population has never been deciphered. Unlike the Minoans, who left texts in their undeciphered linear a script, the Nuragic civilization appears to have been non-literate, leaving no written records. A small number of inscriptions in a script called Nuragic or Paleo-Sardinian have been found on Nuragic bronzes and stones, but these are too few and too short to permit decipherment. The underlying language of modern Sardinian or Sardu, retains substrate elements believed to derive from the pre-Roman Nuragic language, but these fragments have not been sufficient to reconstruct the original tongue. The Nuragic people's own name for themselves, their cosmology, and their understanding of their towers remains entirely unknown. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding: the distribution of nuraghi across Sardinia's landscape has been analyzed using GIS mapping, and several researchers have noted that the spacing of towers is remarkably regular. Many nuraghi are positioned at intervals that allow visual line-of-sight communication with multiple neighboring towers. This has led to the signal tower hypothesis that the nuraghi functioned as a communication network, allowing messages to be relayed across the island through visual signals, fire, or reflected light from tower to tower. Experiments have confirmed that line-of-sight connections exist between many groups of nuraghi, and that a message could theoretically travel from one coast of Sardinia to the other in a matter of hours using such a relay system. If this hypothesis is correct, the nuraghi represent the ancient world's most extensive communication infrastructure. Taken together, These facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological errors. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Sardinian Nuraghe. 7,000 Bronze Age stone towers no one can explain. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the defensive fortress theory is the oldest and most widely held interpretation. Nuraghi were defensive towers, providing refuge and military control over the surrounding territory. Proponents point to the thick walls, narrow entrances, the defensive clustering of nuraghi in groups of 3 to 5 around key resources or territorial boundaries, and the evidence of violence and burning at some sites. Critics note that the sheer number of nuraghi, 1 per square kilometer, would represent a staggeringly overbuilt defensive network, and that many nuraghi have interior spaces too small to meaningfully house a garrison. The theory may be partially correct for the most complex sites, but inadequate as a general explanation. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the chiefly residence theory proposes that each nuraghe was the home of a local chief or clan leader, serving simultaneously as residence, symbol of status, and administrative center. Under this model, Sardinia's Bronze Age society was organized as a mosaic of small chiefdoms, each anchored by a tower that advertised the chief's power and provided a defensible residence. This model explains the regular spacing of towers, the evidence of habitation in some, but not all nuraghi, and the gradation from simple single towers to complex multi-tower compounds like Nuragic. It is currently the model favored by most Sardinian archaeologists, though critics note it cannot explain nuraghi built in locations with no defensive or resource advantage. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the sacred mountain theory, proposed by a minority of researchers, including Mauro Pepino Zedda, interprets nuraghi as artificial sacred mountains, representations of the cosmic mountain or axis mundi that appears in the cosmologies of cultures worldwide. Under this interpretation, the towers were ritual centers rather than residences, built to replicate in stone the sacred geography of the mountain-dwelling culture's original homeland. Proponents note that many nuraghi are positioned on hilltops or ridgelines in ways that emphasize height and skyward orientation, and that the corbelled internal chambers may have served as dark ritual spaces similar to the hypogeum and Newgrange passage chambers. Mainstream archaeology does not reject this theory, but considers the evidence insufficient to support it over the defensive or residential interpretations. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Sardinian Nuraghe 7,000 Bronze Age stone towers no one can explain does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes excavation of Nuraghi sites has produced a consistent pattern of finds that includes domestic pottery, animal bones, grinding stones, and hearths, evidence of habitation, alongside ritual objects, including the elaborate bronze figurines, miniature bronze tower models, and animal-shaped vests, cells associated with religious practices. The co-occurrence of domestic and ritual material in the same structures argues for a multi-purpose function, with the nuraghe serving simultaneously as home, fortress, and sacred space. The bronze figurines in particular are significant because they are found in apparent votive contexts within the nuraghe, suggesting that ritual depositions were made to consecrate or maintain the towers. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented the ancient DNA of the Nuragic population, analyzed in a landmark 2020 study published in Science, showed that Sardinians today are the closest genetic descendants of the original Neolithic farmers who colonized Europe from Anatolia around 7,000 BCE. Unlike every other European population, modern Sardinians received minimal genetic input from the steppe migrations that transformed the rest of Europe between 3000 and 2000 BCE. This genetic isolation explains Sardinia's cultural distinctiveness. The Nuragic civilization developed in relative isolation from the cultural transformations sweeping mainland Europe and created a unique architectural tradition with no clear parallels elsewhere. The same DNA study found that the Nuragic population was genetically homogeneous, suggesting a tight-knit island community rather than a diverse population of immigrants. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. Physical analysis of Nuraghe construction techniques has revealed that the largest single stone blocks used in complex nuraghi weigh up to 80 tons, comparable to the heaviest stones used at Stonehenge or Baalbek. These blocks were quarried from basalt outcroppings, roughly shaped, and transported to the construction site, in some cases several kilometers from the quarry. The absence of ramps, rollers, or other construction equipment in the archaeological record means that the transport and placement techniques used remain unknown. Experimental archaeology projects have demonstrated that large stone blocks can be moved using timber sledges, rope, and human muscle. But replicating the precision of Nuraghe stone fitting, which in the best examples achieves tolerances of less than 5 centimeters over blocks several meters long, has proven extremely difficult with modern tools. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Sardinian Nuraghe. 7,000 Bronze Age stone towers no one can explain. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Sardinia's Nuraghi remain one of the most understudied major monument traditions in the world, largely because they fall outside the mainstream narrative of Western civilization's origins in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece. This has begun to change as Italian and Sardinian archaeologists, supported by increasing international interest, have been applying modern techniques, including ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR landscape surveys, and isotope analysis to Nuraghe sites. New discoveries are announced regularly. In 2015, a previously unknown Nuraghe complex was identified near Cabras that contained extraordinary stone sculpture, now believed to represent the giants of Mont Prama, a collection of pre-Nuragic warrior statues that are among the earliest large-scale stone statues in the Mediterranean. The broader context of Nuragic culture within the Mediterranean Bronze Age is also receiving renewed attention. The question of whether the Sardana mercenaries mentioned in Egyptian texts were Sardinians has moved toward mainstream acceptance, and the implications of Nuragic involvement in the Bronze Age collapse of approximately 1200 BCE, the catastrophic series of civilizational collapses that destroyed the Mycenaean world, the Hittite Empire, and severely damaged Egypt are being actively researched. If Sardinians were among the sea peoples who drove this collapse, they were not peripheral barbarians, but active participants in the ancient world's greatest geopolitical crisis. Understanding the Nuraghi may therefore be key to understanding one of history's most consequential and still debated events. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Sardinian Nuraghe. 7,000 Bronze Age stone towers no one can explain, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Sardinia ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please help us reach more people. If you are watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new documentary. If you are watching on Facebook, tap the follow button on our page to stay connected. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.